So tonight I think we'll start with this. This is Batman. The word for bat is very cool in Tlingit. It's S'igeiditaanuḳáa, which is I think it's a compound within a compound, if you ask me. So what is the word S'igeidi on its own?
Beaver.
Beaver. I think that's made out of three parts. S'ik, yi, at, e. Four parts. I can't count. S'ik is a black bear. Yi is below. At is a thing. The I is what I would call a relational suffix. So you could argue S'igeidi means thing below the black bear, which is interesting to me. Because I'm like, why? Shouldn't that thing? But I don't know. Maybe there's some longer narrative too. We'll have to dig around. Taanu. Anybody know what taanu is? I might have talked about this the other day. I forget. Taanu is an umbilical cord. So you put it all together, you got S'igeiditaanuḳáa is the word for a bat. Like the little one that flies around. Looks kind of like a mouse. So you could probably say S'igeiditaanuḳáa for Batman. So years ago, there's an elder from Sitka named Bertha Karras who used to like to sit in on our classes when she came through town. And one day, I think I did something or students did something, and she said, kawdiké, and then she laughed. And I was like, ooh, what is that? I haven't heard that one before. Kawdiké. Has anybody here heard this term? Kawdiké.
I heard hish to chehwa or something like that. Black magic, but
Oh,
or no, maybe it was just to chehwa.
Tuchehwa is what I would expect.
Yeah.
So hesh could be tleish, tesh, tish. They all do the same thing. So, if we're like, what are you telling us, Batman? We might have to go to the Verb Dictionary. So what are we going to look up if we want to see? I'm going to predict kawdiké is a verb. Why would I think it's a verb? What are some things that say I'm a verb in there?
It looks like might be you.
Yeah, it could be you
Pronoun.
as an object pronoun. Looks like an object pronoun. Iyati, iyake, itlitsteen. Anything else seem verbish in there?
The da, doesn't that mean moving?
The da is a classifier, right? In a short form, back it up a little bit, add an a, and it's around or about. But where it's at right there, that's a classifier. So if you start spotting things, oh, that looks like a classifier. It's just, you'll start to learn when things look like a verb. So if I wanted to see what Batman is telling me, and I go to so I'm like, okay, it's a verb. Let me go to the Lingít Verb Dictionary. That's usually my go-to source. That's source number one for me, just because I'm familiar with it, and it's pretty good at being able to look stuff up. But you can probably look it up in other dictionaries. What am I going to look up? How am I going to find it?
Look up K.
So look up K. So K. So the first thing, when you go to look up a verb, look it up in the long, low form. So what is the long, low form of ke? Because this is a short, high form. K, K-E-I. Okay, we're going to look up K-E-I. So hold on, Batman. We got to go to the Verb Dictionary. So let me go over here. It's a little bigger. So, oops, there it is. I was looking this up earlier. Okay. So we'll go down to K. E starts with EE. So the E verbs, then the A verbs, then the U verbs, then the or vowels. What am I saying? Verbs. So K-E-I. We see ka. And now we would write this ya as 0. K. what does this TR in parentheses, what is that business? Anybody know? Learn how to use this dictionary.
Transitive, it means
Transitive.
Transitive, that means there is an object and a subject in that verb. You cannot remove them. You must remember they are there. So now we might say for S to follow O, for S to untangle O. So it means two things. Actually, I think it means three things, but we'll say two things. To track something, like to follow their footprints, or to untangle something, like a ball of yarn, or your fishing line. There is an S version of the classifier, which is also to trail, to untangle, or to undo your sewing or your weaving. Right? I once saw a master weaver tell this awesome story. Went to a museum, saw this old piece from the same culture as her, and when she looked at it, she thought, I don't know how to weave like that. I've never seen that pattern before. So, when the curator stepped out, she had a little spray bottle that she carried with her everywhere. She sprayed it, undid the weaving, then wove it back up. She's a master weaver. You would probably never know that that happened. And she did it because now she's like, now I know that pattern. It's programmed in my brain. I was like, yeah, do that. Curator would probably go crazy. But that's not the curator's stuff. Like, not at all. Okay. So also, I was watching another master weaver talk about weaving. Had a similar story. Me and my mom went to a museum. We saw this blanket, and it had this finish. They tie it off at the end of a chilcat blanket. I don't know anything about it. It's amazing stuff. And they said we'd never seen an ending like that before. So, curators, go ahead and walk out of the room when the weavers are there. So when the curator walked out of the room, they also undid it to see and then put it back together. Because once they knew how to do it, they could put it back together. It's our stuff. Big deal. And so, but I said, whoa, hold on. There's a verb for what you just did. And that verb would mean you undid the weaving, but it could also be interpreted as you literally followed the footprints of the weaver before you. We had this big oh moment. So then there's a D classifier for something to be undone. Like if you had, my grandpa told me a story one time. This guy came to visit him and was telling him some real intense story. And my grandpa was just a funny person. He liked to laugh, and he also he'd get distracted real easy. And this person's like telling him something real intense. And he's wearing a baseball cap with a big thread poking out. So he's in the middle of telling his big thing. My grandpa reached up and just grabbed that thread and pulled it, and the bill of his hat fell off. I think that's really fun. That would be kawdiké, but also if you had a basket and it started to come unraveled. But for a person, so if TR in parentheses is transitive, transitive means there's an object and a subject. There are both of them. It tells you that with that little thing. So when you look stuff up in here, we just write it out now. We say O-S-classifier verb root. But what would ST mean then? That's how they wrote verbs in the 70s.
Stative.
So but what does that mean? How would we write that nowadays? What does it tell us?
there's only a subject pronoun.
In this case, there is only an object pronoun. Usually, when they wrote this stuff, they would usually put stative. So ST means there's only an object, there's not a subject. So that means we would write this one O-K Ka dash D plus 0 dash root marker K. That's how we're writing them these days. So this means for the object to fail completely. So looking at this, let me tell you there's two more ways that they code this stuff. IN in parentheses, only a subject, not an object. That's just how they code, but this is just something it tells you. It's like, you must put the subject pronoun in there. But you can change it now. Now I know I could change it. The other one, let's see if I can find one. These are transitive. Some of them, they're not really sure. Transitive, intransitive, stative. I am impersonal. That means no object, no subject, cannot add them. So they tell you this stuff right in the back of this dictionary. So we'll go look up fail so we can see what is Batman telling us then about fail. So you got klesh, in this case, yaawaḳaa, did not succeed, didn't obtain it. Failed to conform to expectations, kawdiké. In that case, you could say kawdiké. If, say you tried to speak at a cultural event and it just really didn't go well. You're getting pretty tough on yourself using that kind of language, but really it means qaayati would be the opposite of that, which means it's good, it's pleasant. Qaayati. Keshqa ushti. It's really unpleasant, or ushti, sorry. So here it is. Kawdiké. This was me last night. When I showed, we were in class, I was like, we're going to listen to this story. I'm going to put up this document, and I'll scroll through the words so you can see them. And we're like more than halfway through the story. And someone pops in the chat and says, are you supposed to be showing us something? Because we just see this spreadsheet of bird sentences. So I said, I really blew it. And kawdiké can be serious. It could be serious. Like I get up to give a speech at a funeral or something, and I just do a bad job. I fall apart. That could be a pretty serious one. But it could also be like last time. It was just funny. I was like, well, I really wanted you students to listen before you started reading it. I was just kidding. I messed up. S'igeiditaanuḳáa. That is a compliment in Lingít. You did pretty well. But literally, you couldn't be ripped back or undone, or you didn't fail. You didn't fall apart like some kind of old basket. So going back, I made this for students several years ago after learning this phrase. And so kawdiké is how I would recommend spelling it these days. Then I just looked for a thumbs up picture, and Batman happened to show up with his thumbs up. Then later I found out that there's a whole website where they take pictures of people from movies who are holding a gun, and they turn it into a thumbs up. So it's like layers of interesting stuff in this one little meme. So I thought we'd start with that, because sometimes you got to give yourself a lot of flexibility to do not the greatest job sometimes. That's okay. You got to just keep trying. You got to just keep throwing stuff out there. I like the compliment a lot because it could be a real genuine thing. I've heard it said. And it's kind of funny sometimes too. Raven said it about his own nose one time. He found his nose finally, his beak got pulled off. And he finally found it. He saw it, he's like, huh, kawdiké. That's not bad. It's not too shabby. But it was his own nose. That's a real funny thing in like Lingít way of thinking. So with that, anybody got any questions you were thinking about? Language stuff? I'd like us to look at our bird stories. I'm going to show you where to enter this if you haven't done it yet, or bird sentences. And then we'll talk about how to type in Lingít, and it's got all kinds of challenges. Technology challenges, getting the right keyboard to the right device and for the right system. Once you move into the Google things, all of a sudden things are shortcutting to something. Like I'll try to hit an underline X sometimes and just like random windows will start popping up. We'll talk about some of that stuff. First, anybody got any thoughts or questions before we go forward?
Just on thoughts when you were mentioning how things like unraveling and how things can apply. Just looking up when you mentioned S'igeiditaanuḳáa for the beaver. When I was kind of running down the rabbit hole looking around to look at words, I found a similar like Taiide, which was yellow seaweed. And that wasn't reference to seaweed words or the color. It was what's beneath the rock. So I just was thinking, like Tai and how things are different and how something can become something else and how they reference it as that's that thing underneath there.
Yeah, so te. So yeah, let's take a look. So there's another thing we can just sort of kind of think about. Let's see. Hey, this will be straight from Johnny Appleseed, I guess. So let me try to make this bigger. So this stuff is called S'igeiditaanuḳáa. And so S'igeiditaanuḳáa is yellow seaweed or bladder wrack, I think they call it. It's these little kind of V-shape, it's a little type of kelp. You get it on the low tide. It's very squishy if you were to step on it. If you ever got burned or got a sunburn, you pop it and there's a little liquid in there that feels kind of like aloe vera, like if you got it from the store and you just put it on, it's good medicine. But where this comes from, and you'll start to recognize some of these things because there's certain combinations that just regularly happen. But sometimes it's hard to see. And these are the parts of this word. Te, yi, at, I. But when Tlingit starts to smush things together, and this is called compounding. So some words are going to be 2 words, 3 words. Like if you were to say, there's this thing below that rock, you might say, weh te yi at, where it would be separate words. Those are just separate words because you're saying them in the context of a sentence. But when things become known by that name, a name is created, there are these ways that it smushes things together. And then there's a whole bunch of rules that just start interacting with each other. And some of them are a little unusual. One of them is if a word ends with a short high vowel and you put something onto it, it's usually going to go long and low. So te, for one example, would be, let's see, let's put this up here. Whoops, let me try. So te is, what is te on its own?
Rock.
A rock, right? So there's this, and what is yaawaḳaa on its own?
Deer.
Deer.
Here.
So there's a place in Shkut where the Shukach Adi are from that's called Deer Rock. So if I were to say the deer, it could be interpreted as 2 ways. Like this deer owns that rock. But for place names, it's more like Deer Rock. Like you just put the words together. Like it's not Eagles River, it's Eagle River, right? So what happens is it's going to get this yi on the end, right? There's these rules we're going to learn about how to do this stuff. But when you put something on the end of this, it's going to push it long and low, and then this should go high. So you get yaawaḳaa. And this is just how we start learning how to put these suffixes onto these things. We'll look at a whole bunch of examples, a set of wild rules, but then we'll learn it becomes very predictable. We become very good predictors until we start to really internalize these systems. So if we look at this multi-phase sort of process of getting to S'igeiditaanuḳáa, we get te, yi, at, I. So we got vowel, tone, and we got vowel length. And when we smush them together, all this stuff starts to get really interesting. Because if you put te and yi together, you would expect to get this, te yi. But some vowels go through this really kind of interesting thing, which I don't fully understand. But it's sort of like if you take this E vowel, stretch it out and smush it back, it transforms into an A vowel. I'm not exactly sure why it does that. Because I'll give you another example. Before we finish the S'igeiditaanuḳáa, so I'm going to put some words up here. So those are 3 words and then a suffix. Can anybody tell me what these 3 words are? What's dark?
Into the forest.
Yeah, inland, away from the ocean. Dark is away from the ocean. If you ever heard the term dakka, it comes from this. Dark. What is ao?
Sand.
Sand.
And then what is ut?
Thing.
Thing.
It's a thing. Inland, sand, thing. And then you get the I, which is a relational suffix or possessive suffix. But what happens when we put these 3 things together and we want to make them into one word? There's a couple of things that happen. Most of the vowels are going to just end up short and low unless they cannot contract. And there are some that won't. But the first one will. When ao contracts, for some reason, it goes to ow. And then when ow meets uddi, so ut will become uddi. So let's do this in phases. So then when these 2 get smushed together, they become, they become wadi. Whole bunch of clans that end with wadi or adi. There's some combination of a vowel plus uddi. There's a whole bunch of these things. Shayet, sha, yi, ut. Thing below the head, pillow. Whole bunch of things that say it. Sa, ut. Base of the neck thing, a necklace. So these are patterns that we can start to identify in Lingít. And they show us how clan names are put together. They show us what happens when we tease those things apart and when we smush them together. That way, if someone asks us to make a name for something, we can sort of think of those parts and then smush them together. That's what's going on with S'igeiditaanuḳáa. Te, yi, adi. Thing below the rock. S'igeiditaanuḳáa. Yaawakszaa is another one, which is a fun one. Yaawakszaa is fat under the rock, which is the word for a sea anemone. Is that how you say it? Anemone. Okay.
Kune.
Ah,
I was trying, I don't know if it was in your intermediate workbook, but do these contractions come just because when you're speaking so fast that they end up becoming that?
well, it's more like if we want to take these bunch of words and make them into a single word, what happens is everything tends to get contracted except for the last word. The last word is sort of the one that stays intact, and then everything else goes short.
Okay.
Okay. So we talk about birds and typing in. Let's talk about typing in Lingít. So first thing, klingitlanguage.com, under Learning Lingít, Intermediate Lingít, if you scroll down, And I was having a hard time getting this to update for me the other day, but there is a link that says write out your bird sentences on this Google Sheet by clicking here. Hopefully it works. Sometimes I'll make a Google Sheet and I follow all the little things and it says anybody can write on it, but then no one can write on it. So if I click on that, then I end up here and I get some bird sentences. As far as typing these things in, like when I was typing mine in, like if I was going to say yaawaḳaa, that's what comes up, and I don't know why. So I have, let's see, I think I'm going to have to share my entire screen, which should be this one. So you folks online, can you see all these little icons up on the top right here? So this one right here, this little TL that looks like a tiny chill cat blanket, is the Crippen keyboard that was made by Zeus James Crippen. So if I click on here, I can switch between US keyboard, which I usually don't use, Hawaiian keyboard if I'm trying to talk with my friends in Hawaii, but my Hawaiian is not good enough to do that anymore, and then the Lingít keyboard. So with the Lingít keyboard, it doesn't work so well here, but I'll switch back to here. We're gonna, well, I guess I'll keep that. So if I just type, everything works the same as most other keyboards. But if I hold down the Option key and I type K, X, and G, now these have the little tiny underline on them. The character is called combined macron below. Talking with IT folks, it's not like I memorized this stuff, but we're trying to figure out, like, is there some easier way we could do this? Because the other thing too is the university is trying to figure out how to allow people to put their preferred names in Lingít with the Lingít characters we're currently using. One of the nice things, so if I were to write the same thing, K, X, G, and I'm actually going to put 2 Ks and 2 X's and 2 Gs. So what you'll notice, if I do this underneath, oops, and if I just highlight these and I press underline, that's a big difference. So on the top, you can clearly see that those are different underlined characters. The bottom one looks like a link. And if you just had the G on its own, sometimes that is it's hard to see that underline. One of the nice things about this is it drops this underline below the G. So it doesn't get lost in the swoop of the G. But if you sort of say, I like to use really fancy comic book, okay, fine. I like to use fancy fonts. Do what I say. Oh, no, it's not doing it at all. Well, fine, be that way. Guess there's no problem at all. Huh, okay. Well, the point I was trying to make, which is this won't allow me to do it right now, but sometimes if you try a certain font, some of these characters will look like just a square with an X through it. They won't show up at all. So you are kind of limited to the types of fonts that you use. There's 2 main fonts, probably 3, that I use when doing work in Lingít. And I'll show you, I'm going to get rid of this. One is I would say don't use the underline formatting, because you might send it to someone and then that underline goes away just because it erases the formatting. I had a whole big project one time where I accidentally undid the underlines, then I didn't realize it, then I closed it, the next time I opened it, I couldn't undo the thing. So then I tried to redo it, but I had so many errors in that thing. And I tend to have a lot of errors anyways, because I'm a human being. But so the first one that I like to use is this font called Brill, B-R-I-L-L. If you just go to an internet search engine and type in Brill font, you'll be able to get there. Like, so if I go to Brill font, font with an F, for whatever reason that was a PH. So that takes me to Brill.com. I see Brill typeface, and I can navigate from there, give them all my information for life, and I can go and download this font. It's free. If you want to publish something that you intend to sell, even just to recover the money, or some nonprofit is going to do it, you have to buy the font if you're going to publish something and sell it. So just keep that in mind. I don't think they'll come for you, but I do think that's in their legal agreements. So I have purchased this font for like $140. It wasn't a whole lot, but it's not nothing. The other one that I like to use, especially for doing stuff for kids, is called Indica New Basic. And I'm just going to put an A in front of here. The reason I like this one is because the letter A, kids don't do the little, I don't even know what to call this type of A, like a little typewriter A. Kids don't write an A like that. Kids write an A more like that. It doesn't look like handwriting because it could be hard to read, but it looks close enough to, like, it seems more kid-friendly. So sometimes if I'm writing something in Tlingit and I want it to be less intimidating, I'll use this font. For this one, it's called Indica New Basic. We go back to the internet, we type in Indica New Basic, and we get, you want to go to this one called sil.org, SIL, the Summer Institute of Linguistics. So the thing with these two fonts is they are made by folks who work with lots of languages. That's what you want to go for. A whole bunch of fonts are out there. A bunch of them are not going to do the job. But if you're making stuff on a regular basis, you should be using the same font, I think. So here's Indica New Basic. And then the third one, which should automatically be on your computer, I think. I use Helvetica or Helvetica New because they have no problem with these underlying characters. Those are my three fonts, probably in the order that I like them, but feel free to check out other things. There's quite a few others, but if you start working with stuff and the underlines are turning into weird characters, then just know that this is the reason. One more thing on the font. So this word "khas" is a stick. I'm going to tell you one other thing about the Crippen keyboard for now. Maybe we'll do a couple other things later. You could do the root marker, you could do the zero marker, you could do the Y with the two dots. Maybe we'll do that stuff. So the first one is the apostrophe. So sometimes if you're using the Crippen keyboard and you're using some other font, especially some of the fancier fonts, whatever, like Papyrus or whatever you're trying to type in, and you hit that apostrophe key, you might notice it turns into one of those boxes with the little X in it, which looks like the wrong answer in like some game show or something. The other thing is if I sort of put something into air quotes, you'll notice that it reverses the first one kind of automatically. They're called smart quote markers. And if I just use the regular quotation from the Crippen keyboard, it doesn't do that. So one, if you install the Crippen keyboard, know that the apostrophe sign that you use regularly is called, it's a character one as opposed to a punctuation one. The reason why that's important, these two words, khas and khas, seem identical. But if I double click on the first one to copy that word, it includes that apostrophe. If I double click on the one underneath it, It does not. So if I copied and paste it, you know, I mean, you want to put goose, and you end up with goose. So you don't have cloud, now you got vagina. But it's because, you know, so that's what this thing does. So the Crippen keyboard gives you a few of these things. It's not the only keyboard that's out there. If you're not using a Mac computer, an Apple computer, then I don't think you can install it for now. We're trying to figure out some long-term solutions to some of this stuff, which ideally, you wouldn't have to install anything. You would just be able to click some option in your computer. Because if I go to, hopefully I don't reveal any sensitive stuff here. If I go to keyboard here, and I go to import input sources, and I want to add one, if I scroll down this list, they got Cherokee installed. It's just there on every computer that they sell. I don't know how they did it. I had to go ask them. But if you scroll down here to click it, you ain't got it. So there is some work to be done if you're a technology person, you know some technology people. I'm talking to our IT folks. Could we just get it installed on every computer sold in the United States so we can infiltrate and take over the world? Sorry, I gave you too much. But you can, so if you go down to others, this is where you will find the Lingít keyboard if you follow the instructions to install it, which is a little bit tricky. You have to do a couple things to get there.
Name?
Yes,
Did I hear you say that Crippen keyboard only works on Apple computers?
that's what I heard. Did you install it on something else? Does it work?
I don't have an Apple computer.
Okay.
Or an Apple phone.
So if you do not, you'll go to the internet and type in Language Geek keyboards. So here you go to Language Geek, native languages, you go to keyboards, scroll down, there's a whole bunch. Let's see, where is it? I don't know. There it is. We get our whole own category. So here's Lingít, and then you can follow these instructions. You can add this. I don't know what happened. You can add this keyboard, and here's the big difference with this one. So what the Crippen keyboard does is it says when there's an underlined K character. So these are called Unicode, which means you type that, that's a character. It's pretty widely recognized. That underlined K is probably not going to give you a whole lot of problems. The underlined X and the G is actually two different characters. It's an X, and there's this other character that says, put this thing back there, right? So for example, if I wanted to type this thing, we'll type, so there's the letter X. I want to underline on that because I'm going to type on. There is a third option, which is a manual option, and you have to buy it. There's a program called Popchar, Popchar. I don't know if that's supposed to be care, like character, whatever. But that puts this little letter P up in the top left corner of your screen. I don't know if you folks can see it on mine. It's very small. But when I click there, this little window pops up. And now I got a whole bunch of things I could put on there. A whole bunch of stuff. And here I can find the combining macron below, and it does remember the most recently used things, and I can put it on there. This is your solution if you have something that won't allow, like that Google sheet. It won't let me I could put X and then go in there and put the macron on it myself. This is what the Crippen keyboard does. It says, when you push Option X, it does those two things at the same time. This one first, then the little underline. The Language Geek keyboard, you type the letter X, and if I remember right, you type semicolon, that will put the underline on the character behind it. Whether it's an X, G, A, you type in smalgach. If you use what do they call it? The thing that's under the question mark, the slash that goes that way, whatever it's called, forward slash, that will put a high tone mark on the character behind it. So the Language Geek keyboard will also do the job. You just have to type that in yourself. I believe you hold down the control button or one of them and the semicolon and the dash to get the, if you need to type a semicolon or a dash, you can still do it. Those are your 3 options for typing with this stuff. Couple of bonus things for the Crippen keyboard. If you hold down the Alt key, press number 1, you get this weird looking Y thing. Then you take your hands off the keyboard, then you type 0, then you get the 0 marker. If you need to type some 0 markers. The other one is the Alt 2, the number 2, gets you that root marker. If you type Alt and 6, that gives you this little symbol, the yellow, with that little thing. And now if I type any vowel, I'm going to get the vowel with the little hat over it. If I hold Option and push the little tilde, it's a tilde on top and the little, I don't know what the thing is called. It's right underneath the Escape key. And then I type a vowel, I get the long low vowel for the Lear writing system. That was a lot of technological stuff. But I remember years ago, I was like, we're going to do Tech Day, and then I never did Tech Day. So this is an impromptu Tech Day. For both Samsung, Google phones, Apple phones, there's an app called Chert, C-H-E-R-T. You can install that on your phone, follow some directions. Then you'll have a keyboard that allows you to type in all Alaska Native languages. So for that one, you hold down on the G, the X, or the K, and a little window pops up, and then you can drag over to the underlined G. For a vowel, you type like A, go down right next to the space bar, just to the right. There's an upward mark, and that's how you put the tone marks on there. Now we can.
Hey, does the Crippen keyboard come with that little cheat sheet? Like, I would love to remember how to do the, the 0 and the root. Where did you get that? Because I have it downloaded and I basically just use the Alt to do the underline or the high tones, but I didn't know about this other stuff.
Shortly after he made it, he stayed at my house. I was like, show me this thing. So that he was my cheat sheet. And then, but yeah, I can make up a little, like the common ones that we use here and how to do it.
Geez.
Okay. Yeah, I'll make that sometime soon. And then I'll put it up probably on tonight's class. Because I think it's handy to know how to do that stuff. Okay.
Renee,
Uh,
my kids showed me on my phone that if I want to type something and I want to put tone marks on it, I just hold down the vowel, hold down that key, and then that window will open up and there'll be more different tone marks and accent marks than one could ever hope to need. And the one that you want is about the second one over, but that's an Android phone. And they haven't told me how to do underlines.
well, you can do tone marks the exact same way on an iPhone or iPad. So you hold onto the vowel, and then you turn, and then a little sub window pops up, and you can select the high tone. You can also do the Hawaiian and the Maori. They use a long line over there. Sometimes I have the Hawaiian keyboard on, I'll be typing Tlingit. I'm like, what's going on with my vowels? And why are these other things all crazy? It's because I got the wrong keyboard on. Hey. Yeah, so cutting and pasting, sometimes you have to do that. So it's pretty often that I will be working on something like if it's on a Google Sheet, like a shared thing. So for now, we're kind of sharing on Google Sheets. We might dump it if it turns out to be kind of a bit of a problem. We could move it over to Basecamp and we could put our stuff in Basecamp. But we also have to figure out how to make Basecamp more efficient, which I don't know how to do, but I'll figure it out. Okay. But for now, and we'll just take a look at the ones that we have. It's no big deal. I just thought it'd be neat to have these so we could look at them, right? And so maybe I'll make some of these a little shorter. And then we could do this. And so I've got the Lingít, and then I've got the English. Yaawakszák just means words, language, speech. I mean, any of those things. You'll see that sometimes you can put a possessive marker on there. Yaawakszák, Lingít yaawakszák. We had a fun time during one of our language sessions, just sort of a gathering where we did true confessions. It was pretty fun. And someone said, I was in your classes for like 3 years, and I never thought to ask what yaawakszák was, but you sure said it a lot. And so I was like, you went 3 years? That's amazing. But yaawakszák on its own would be language, speech, word. Yaawakszák would be the possessed form. Lingít yaawakszák, yaawakszák. This phrase, kawdiké, would be translation. That's how you'd say a person is translating it, or it's a translation. Okay. So I don't know if I might have typed these different than I said them, but I said S'igeiditaanuḳáa we yaawaḳaa anasia we yaawaţaa we atwadidzuquchu atyikdach. S'igeiditaanuḳáa is one time. Awe just gives a little bit of separation between things. Chosatin, I saw it. We yaawaḳaa, that raven, a raven. Anasi literally means its intestines. We tried to cook up the name yaawaţaa for hot dog, but the elder shot it down. He said, it's not literally a hot dog. Fine. He said, it's something's intestines. We're like, yeah, I guess so. You know, it's insides. Yaawaţaa is they stole it. We atwadidzuquchu is a vehicle. Yikdach, from in the vehicle. Whenever we're doing in something, there's going to be sometimes some little tricky areas because English uses in for a whole bunch of things. In the water, in the car, in the past, in the safe, in my mind, in my dreams. There's going to be a whole bunch of different ones for in a tree. Like a lot of those are going to be different for Lingít. In the house. It's just going to have different ones for different types of those things. So don't worry if we got to adjust those as we go. It's just a different logical system. So you yik into a car. Which is interesting because it's closed, but it's because you yik into a boat. Like yikde, yikdach, into, out of. So you do the same ones for a car. We tlachanetz away with two wahain yashukach adikach tu sagu dachwasatini. The shukach adi, we claim the tlachanetz. So watuahain would be how you could talk about the crest of your clan. And then there's the clan right there. And I'm happy. Dach is a pluralizer or a non-human thing. I'm trying to practice using it a little bit more. I probably said hus while we were in class. Ha'ani wan qanin stachwasatin we shaki khan ganda degugu awe. On our land we see these things called shaki khan. It's a yellow-bellied sapsucker, and it's a woodpecker. Kaik Lingít chenach yaawakszák awe chatch ewa wus wasadu sak penguin Lingít chenach achina kawanik hintakyan dakin gach awe. A speaker once asked me, what do you call a penguin? Then he told me it's called a duck that flies in the water. Now, anybody want to share one or two or any of yours now that we can see them? You can ask about them, you talk about them, do whatever you want.
Share the ones that we have on here, or
Yeah, because then we can see them. I think it's helpful.
yeah, I could share one of mine.
Oops.
Yeah, I don't know if this Endea is from the Inland Dictionary, and I didn't know. I had it highlighted for some reason because I was unsure of it.
Okay.
But glee is the meat. Away is because it's talking about it being away.
Uh-huh.
I don't know why it's in brackets. It was in brackets in the Lingít, so I just kept it like that.
Oh, okay.
Change it, yeah. And then achtuasagu is I like or want.
Okay. Yeah, I think that away could certainly just be, and it's, in this case, it usually just provides a little bit of distance between one thing and another thing. So you have like, when someone hears something glee, they might have to think back because I would think a canvasback duck is probably not very commonly, like we just don't use as many of the duck names as we used to.
Mm-hmm.
And then away, achtuasagu. Okay, I like it. Sheesh. Anybody else want to share one of theirs so we can revisit the bird sentences?
I'll share one.
Oh.
Easy one. Yech, niche, yaanagut. Ravens walking along the beach.
Whole bunch of raven stories that start out with Yech, nich chianagut, or nich chianagut yech. And that's just a very common way to start. Like, raven walks along the beach. And then you have sees something, thinks of something, does something. Okay, sheesh. Anybody else want to share one?
I'll go,
Oh.
because this is the one that I made up completely. The other ones I used, it's my fourth one. Dachun. Geesh u chatik u kle askete adi yanachut. So I didn't know about the chatik. I thought it was yells at me.
Oh, okay.
Don't know if the me part I did correctly.
Okay, so the eek part, we'll go to the, let's see, where do I want to go? Oh, let's see, we're going to share that one. So we're going to go to the eek verb for a second. Scroll up. So we see to invite someone or to holler at someone. And so we'll just take a look at both of them. So you say, if you go down to this one, I heard her call me, call your dog, holler at me when it thaws out, and then to invite, so here you would have and in this case you would also have would be to call out to me. So yeah, that's correct. Would be to call out to me. Let's see, where is this?
And then I wanted to say while, when, I guess when.
So There's a couple different ways you could take care of the second part. So if you say chesh chat ich chutle askatu, in this case, I would probably suggest changing ade to yich. So if you say askatu ade yanchagut, I'm walking towards it, the woods. But this is another one of those things that we just talked about. In English, it's in Tlingit, it's yik. So there's a whole bunch of compound names that have asku to yik, in the woods, which is really interesting because as is a tree, gu is the base of a tree, tu is inside, and then yik is also in. So there's a whole bunch of, it almost gets metaphorical when you start to think too hard about it. But you'd say aska to yik. There's that little song, little bunny foo-foo walking through the forest. I used to sing that with my kid and say, Uski gachi hoo-hoo aska to yichwu good. That's it. So, Achsanu we goblins kahasa shawa hitch, and clubs the whatever things on the head. So yeah, but yeah, that looks great. And then ishk chat ik chutle aska tu yichyan chagudi. So I'd probably change that to you could tie two things together as far as verbs, and we'll look at how to do that. But yeah, I think that's great. Okay, can sheesh. Maybe one more, just for fun. Uchika. Break time. Okay, come back at 1/4 and we'll look at something a little different. The link to these bird sentences are there if you guys want to check them out or continue to add yours. On mute. Is everybody okay? I was talking and doing stuff. Sheesh. So I thought we'd start looking through the beginning Lingít Workbook. We're going to go through this thing kind of fast until we get to some parts where it feels like, hey, let's look at this. So as we go through, I don't want you to feel like it's going too fast, but also this is stuff you've probably done at some level. If there's stuff you want to review, just ask about it. There's no problem stopping at any point, looking at stuff. So, let's talk about sounds. There's these kind of regions in the mouth where the sounds come from. For Tlingit, almost everything is behind the lips. And actually most of the stuff is behind the teeth. And some stuff is right here in the snoring, I guess. I don't know, they get kind of fancy names for them. I don't say these things. Zeosh helped me out with this, and Jeff Lear helped me out with this. I say lips, teeth, behind the teeth, pizza burning zone, snoring zone, throat. That's what I say. Just to like talk about where these sounds come from. Because if you say velar and uvular, I'm just like, I don't know. People ask me, was that like a voiceless fricative? I'm like, your mother was a fricative. I don't know. I'm not always comfortable with these terms. So, lips, behind the teeth, pizza burning. So I should just redo this. I'll like sneak it in there before they publish the second edition. Like, how did the uvular become the snoring zone? Because nobody cares. I don't know.
Okay.
Uh,
Just put a color code on the side, and then you can put your names on the
Right,
ones
so
on
to
the
say,
side.
AKA, right? Let's put it over there. Brilliant. I'm doing it. Because I made a poster out of this, which I'll update. I'll add those to the poster, and we'll go from there. Going through, so this chart just sort of also talks about, but there is some use to some of this stuff, which is what happens, right? A vowel usually means your vocal cords are going and nothing is really stopping the sound from coming out of your mouth. The airflow. Nothing impedes the airflow. That's usually what happens with a vowel. So if you just say A, E, I, O, U, like there's nothing that slows anything down. Just the mouth is everything's fairly open, vocal cords activate, and then the mouth takes a certain shape, right? You got, if you go from the front, you go E, A, U, Ah. It just goes a little bit further back in the throat, and the shape of your mouth changes. When we start talking about consonants, something happens to the airflow to make scraping sounds, other types of things. So what this does, it sort of says, how much is that being stopped, and what part of the mouth is it in? So we go through here on the lips. There's not a whole lot of stuff. We have, oh look, it says number 2, but that's not number 2. There should be a 2. Okay. Shoot! It's always something. Okay. So if you're from the inland, or there were speakers in Angoon who used to do this, and speakers in Klukwan as well, you might say masa. Everybody say masa.
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 Walk.
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 So the focus here is on the very first sound we're making. The M sound, the W sound. Those are the two sounds that are in front of the teeth. There is also a W that I think is unvoiced, like the KW, the XW, when they're at the end of a word. And you get that little, which I got a mask on, you can't really see. Lips purse up, little puff of air. Just like on this one over here. We'll just jump right over this. Noosk. Noosk. And here, the D sound, this is important, the D sound and the T sound are actually the same sound. What happens is your vocal cords turn on. So if we just took T-A, D-A, we go t, or ta, da, ta, da, ta, da. We're not saying a word right now. We're just like emphasizing that those are the same sounds. That's going to be a factor when we talk about the relational, putting a suffix on certain words. But here we have a word. Let me figure my zoom out. Okay, there. Da. Everybody say it? Ta. Ta. So again, to review, the apostrophe means you close your lungs, make the consonant, open the lungs back up. That's why for a lot of folks who are new to learning Tlingit, instead of saying ah, they'll say ah. There'll just be this little gap because their body is kind of trying to figure out, especially like talk, it will be talk. There'll just be this little gap there. You'll hear it when people are learning Tlingit. But it's because, English doesn't really require you to shut your lungs and open them a whole lot. Just really an uh-oh, or people who are from across the pond who speak the Queen's English might say things like bloody. That's a glottal right there. So then when we put the L sound in there, kla and gla are the same sound. You add the vocal cord to it, kla, gla. They will go back and forth at times. But this word is glate. Kleihlu, utk, chluch, chuk. Everybody feel pretty much okay with this TL apostrophe and the L apostrophe?
I have trouble with
they get a little tricky. I think what happens is a lot of times an L apostrophe does end up sounding like the TL apostrophe. The L apostrophe should be going out the sides more. Ook. And it should be a little longer. Ook. The TL goes forward. Utk. Utk. So this word should not sound like ook. Shouldn't have that click. Ook. It's a more of a squish. Squish. Okay. Jumping over to the TS and the DZ, there's another sound pair. You'll have things that end with a TS, like chenukts, sweet, chenuktzi. It changes to a DZ. It happens. Zanti, tsats, tsatsi, seek, seek. The TS apostrophe and the S apostrophe, also sometimes tricky to sort of hear the difference between them, but you would have tsa and tsa, tsa, tsa. A similar thing, once you put that other letter, like that T, it just shortens everything. That's kind of what happens. The CH and the J is another interchangeable. They're not interchangeable, but the CH, like cheech, will become chi, j. It turns into a J. And we'll talk about the reasons why. These things are predictable. Janmu, chash, chak, sha. We missed a couple. So there's actually two ways to write a voiced L. One of the ways that is done in the beginning Lingít Workbook is to write the L with the underline on there. Because this word is a borrowed word and it's daleye. Daleye. So you are making the ul sound, which you do not usually hear in the whole Lingít language. However, my great-grandfather, who spoke Lingít from birth, that was his first language, regularly made a voiced L sound where you would usually have an N sound. So would Kawdiké Susie James. So there's a Raven story where Raven's talking to this octopus. And you would expect the line to go, hakunak, hakunak. Come here, octopus. But she says, hakulak, hakulak. So she calls it lak. My great-grandfather, his name was Bert Dennis. And Richard Downhauer was telling me when he first met him. And he said, because Lingít has no R's, right? I don't know why people name kids Bert. It's okay, whatever. So he says, I'm Bud Dennis. I'm not making fun of him. His Lingít was immaculate. I listened to him and I'm like, whoa. But there was this certain thing. So the reason I bring it up, sometimes I'll write an N. I would prefer an N with an underline. Because that seems like it's a pure substitution. I heard it 2 different speakers. He also said, here's a Thingish question with this little N to the L thing. Because listen to this other recording, we have this place called Tanani. And he's talking about Wuhan. He says, Uhalaya, Uhalaya, Tal Ali Akhehawuti. So he said, Tal Ali. And Nora Dowenhauer was interviewing him. She said, Tan Ani again? He says, Tal Ali. That's just how he said it. It was really interesting. So that voiced L is something to think about. Then he asked Richard Downhauer, he says, tell me about model skills. And Richard said, model skills. And then my great-grandma leaned over and says, He wants you to tell him what you know about marten skins. So English was his second language, and he had this, but there was this really neat thing. And so you will have voiced L's in songs, borrowed words, and I think if any of the Tlingit peoples were living more close to another group that had a voiced L, then they might use it. Haida has one. So okay. What else? What else did I forget? Then the Y sound, yak. Okay. K can turn into a G, and a G can turn into a K. You're going to see this happen quite a bit. So there's this, if you were to just tell someone to be physically strong, you would say, well, you'd say, S'igeiditaanuḳáa. S'igeiditaanuḳáa. Some people, let's see, S'igeiditaanuḳáa. If you're telling someone to be courageous, you might say, Ituwuqlatsin. So that G just turned into a K. You might also say Iqlatsin. You probably would. But so sometimes a G is going to contract just to a letter K. Sometimes a word that ends with K, like kuk, if you make it mine, it's kugu. We'll look at this stuff. K to a G, CH to a J. What else do we have? TS to a DZ. All right. There's another word. Gun.
Gun.
Cost.
Cost.
Ink. Khusha.
Russia.
Khusha.
Russia.
Every time we see an X with no underline, you cannot put the on there. It's got to be the jet airplane, the cappuccino machine, the wind. That scrapey sound. That sound without your lungs. Apple is just a good word to just walk around saying. It's really good practice. We're not really like Tlingit and COVID that's a bad because you gotta have so much spit in your mouth, and we got all these ejectives, so spit's probably flying. Anyway, so wash your masks, change your masks, do all that stuff that you need to do. There is also this Y with the two dots over it. To me, when I hear it, it sounds like a Y that comes through your nose. Ng. Ng. The example is you see it, you hear this sound specifically still today in Teslin and in Kluckwan. So outside of those areas, you might hear people say, Gaidanak, stand up. But there, they'll say, Ging danak. You get this little, it's almost like there's an NG smushed in there really fast. But if you go way back, if you just hopped in the time machine 100 years ago, walk around in different Tlingit communities, you would hear this all over the place. Yaawaḳaa was one of the last places where it sort of fell out of use. There's still some, well, it doesn't live there, but there's a speaker from there who still uses it. You hear it in Kluckwan, but you still hear it today in Carcross and in Tesla. We will write this when we pull some different pieces out, though, because we'll say that'll turn into a W and that'll turn into a Y. It'll go back and forth. There were, a phrase. Not all nouns are like this, but like some of them you'd see would have that little Y with the dots over it. If we were to write it how I would say it a long time ago, like yeti. And I think of that one because there's speakers in some communities, most places you'd hear people say, do yeti, their child, do yeti. But some speakers in some communities, you'd hear them say, do wadi. It would turn into a W. So now we're going to put a W after some of these. Gweill, Kwe, Kwat, Kwasta, Kwan. Okay. Now we go to the snoring zone, to the green. I think in this area here that we just sort of did, this X is probably the one that a lot of people need to work on. The L apostrophe, the TL apostrophe, those are probably the ones that folks just need to practice. And I think just continuing to power through and use them, and then your body will catch up. It might take you a little while, but the more you hear it, the more you say it, the more you try it, the more you practice it, it does start to get easier. So these ones, the underline K can turn into an underline G. So, oops, that's not hill. I gotta fix that one. Ah, okay. I just panic. Okay, that is a wolf. Pooch. 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 Puck. A tail. A tail. Gaat. Gaat. On. On. Huina. Huina. You're usually going to have something on front of here. Jikwena is a hand towel. S'igeiditaanuḳáa is a dish towel. Crippen is a tissue. So there, right on it, you've got j, which in the verb is hands. You've got ch, which on a verb is a nose or a beak. Then you've got s'igeiditaanuḳáa, which is a noun for dishes. You wouldn't have tukwena though. You have tukacheita. It's magic of the language. So you would expect a butt wiper, but you end up with a tukacheita. Go pre-contact. It was some kind of stick. I don't know anything about it. I think it had a certain shape to it. That's what people did a long time ago. But okay. Juan. So this says people of, but it's the ancestral people of a place. We all might live here, but we're not all Juan. That's the people from the clans that are from this place. Usually when we start talking about Juan, we're linking ourselves back. And we can't just invent a Juan for every single place, but these are things that are being usually discussed among clans. There are whole groups of people that didn't exist, and they came in through a process of making them into Tlingit peoples. There were Iyak people, there were Atna people who came and became Tlingit people. And they put Juan on their name. So that it does happen, but it has to do with, usually a specific place name comes right before it. A pot is Kwat. I went Khwagud. Kwat. Na'at. Hit. And this one is yay on the wage.
Yay on a wage.
But it's usually yay on the H. That's all the sounds. Made them all. The other thing is the sets of vowels. The A vowels, the E vowels, the I vowels, the U vowels. each of them has 4 variations. Short, low, short, high, long, low, long, high. Sometimes they will move. Sometimes it'll switch. So it's just good to remember these, like the eh goes to a, the I goes to e, the goes to ah, the goes to oo. There's a debate right now about this o vowel. So for several years I was teaching in the summers in Dayslin, and I was hearing this o sound regularly. And then there's a couple other sounds I was hearing regularly, and we're trying to sort of get to the bottom of it. There seemed to be a pattern. And this is what I think the pattern is. When you have a U vowel, I should probably actually add, we're still trying to figure out how to document this. And 2 O's with 1 underline under one of the O's is kind of a hard thing to type. The reason I think it should be an underline there is because here's the rule. If you have a U vowel and you put any sort of consonant that you would put an underline under on either side, it'll push it to the O vowel. Pooch, poach, pook, poke. That just seems to be the pattern. And as we sort of tested out some words, it seemed to be pretty predictable. So using this writing system, if there's an underline on either side of that U vowel, you should expect it to go to an O. Because they would also say, and they say this is a cluck one, yanakoch, instead of yanakuch, yanakoch. Slight difference, but it is there. So one of the things about a writing system is it has to be able to accurately capture the dialects, which is a very tricky thing. We were sitting there talking about gao and what the ending should be. And we had 3 different speakers from one community who gave us 3 different answers. And then they started talking to each other. Like, what? That's how you say it. This is how you say it. So, okay, any questions on the sounds? Okay. So then we go through and we'll just say these each once. Just a separate noun that sort of focuses on trying to put this sound at the front. I think there's 1 letter where I don't think there's a word that starts with that letter. So this sound goes wa, wasus, ma, mush, cha, cheech, cha, eat, da, pla, plate, za, zaid, ja, There's 4 different ways to say this. Junwu, Jinwu, Junnu, Jun. If you're in Yakutat, you probably say Jinwu. If you're in Teslin, you'll probably say Junnu. If you're from Carcross, you might say Jun. Shla. I'm just putting an A vowel at the end, just so you know. Shlu. Shug. Na. Nusk. Sa. Seek. Speak. Sha. Sha. Ta. Tia. Pla. Kekatunk. E. Sa. Sa. Atsi. Ya. Yak. Ga. Hooch. Ha. Cost.
Cost.
In Cheyi. Ha. Khasha. Ha. Gwa. Gwasha. Kwa. On Kweyi. Ak. Yak. Kwat. Ak. Zisk. A little puff of air at the end. Hwa. Hwasta. Ah. Hwa. Hwan. Ah. Z. Take a breath. Booch. Poach. Ha. Huck. Take. Ha. Khat. On. Last set of the more challenging ones, I think. Kwa. Huina. I must not have finished my note. Okay. Most often paired with. Suspenseful. Okay. Kwa. Juan. The word never ends. Okay. Ak. Nak. Kwa. Kwat. Ak. Shek. Kwa. Shanakhwayi. Hunch. Kwa. Kwat. Nech. Now back to the more easier ones, maybe. This one means that just there's no sound. Yana 8. Ha. Hit. The HW is pretty rare, but here it is. Yanahwain. There's all the sounds. So going through, I'm going to switch the view to like show 2 pages here. So what chapter 1 does, just to give an overview, is it starts to, let's zoom into this real quick. Shkate Jesse Johnny was one of my language teachers, one of my mentors. When I first started teaching here at UAS, she looked up what time my classes were, and she would call me before I came to class to just give me encouragement, which is really important because sometimes you just feel like giving up. Sometimes you feel like so hard, so much to do, good grief. Some people are really mean to me, and it was really nice to have that. She was always really close, a really close person to me. I'm still very close friends with her grandchild, Skeiki. They're Chuk and Shaw. And at one point I went over to visit her and I brought a little recorder and I just said, what do language students need to hear to stay inspired and to not give up? And she gave a long and wonderful speech and kind of ended with this bit of a chant. We should say, Yiguayakwan, Yishik Ohascha, Yichet Haswusi Achidat, Yiguayakwan, Qoneir tu atitsu. Yigo ayachwan. Uhan ayah. Hashilk ohas has to itchian to at. Yigo ayachwan. Shtikat yuhan. So there's a translation over here on the right side. And then if you go down, you can see what happens when you pull all those words apart. So there's been a bunch of work that's gone into this workbook to sort of figure out how do you do this stuff and how do you encode this stuff and how do you, because sometimes you want to see how the language works. And there are a few things that I've changed about how I do things. So like some of these things, like you have this zero and this qa that are in there. So now instead of saying what those things are, what I'm saying is if you put those things together, you have a hortative verb. And there's other ones where it'll be like, this is a future verb, this is a perfective verb. Just to sort of show how to start putting these things together. And as we move from beginning Tlingit to intermediate Tlingit, we'll say, now we're going to teach you how to put those things together yourselves. You start by recognizing those things. Okay, that must be future, that must be perfective. There's certain things that show us that. And all that means is future, we're talking about it's going to happen, not going to happen. Perfective means it did happen or it didn't happen. Doesn't really have to do with time necessarily. Because you can have things like I could say, like if we go up to this one, Yich'et haswusiach. That can be interpreted two different ways. They listen to you all. They are listening to you all. It doesn't have to do with time. It means it's already happened. But that's because the event has already occurred. There's certain things in Tlingit where it's like there's time before and there's time after. Not so much time during. And we'll see some examples of that. The other one is chwasaku. That W sound has to be in there. That doesn't mean I knew it, but it does mean I have come to know it. I know it. Okay. Oops. So we start going through a set of nouns in here for vocabulary building. It's a big part of beginning Tlingit. Learn the name for this, learn the name for that, learn the name for this. So as we go through, it does try, I guess I'll scroll, to focus on images as opposed to the English word for it. So going through, we'll just say these once, just so we can say. Atdaye, tas, shawat, in, te, said, sheye, gitgiya, git, ayaudati, ayamdati, peace, nukshiyan, shukshiyan, gut, wushyayi, una, yai, yao, e, seal, seem, new, yana eight, yak, saknain, cheech, da, gao, gam, in, janwu, janu, jan, jinwu. Now when you see one, you're like, what do I call you? Where are you from, Janwu? Janu, Jinwu. Kakain, Nusk, Sak, Shah, Tia. I had that as long. I think it's supposed to be short. So that's one. There's a couple things I've had to change. It's like I had to say Tia my whole life. Okay. wasus,
Wasus.
yak.
Yak.
So like building these, like you should know all of these nouns. If there's any of them you don't know, there's lots of ways to practice these. When I learned vocabulary for Tlingit, it was from the Orange Noun Dictionary. That was the only dictionary we had in 1996. So I went through and I found these blank flashcards and I copied down every single word. And they were organized by categories. And I would go from, I think I started from English to Tlingit. So I would look at it and I'd say, okay, spoon, shush. And I would just see if I could remember it before I turned it over. And then I got them. You know, and once I figured out I had them all, I went from Tlingit to English. And once I figured that I had all those, I just shuffle them all up in a whole bunch of different orders. And I just pushed myself because I was learning in Minneapolis. So I didn't really have anybody to talk to. So I was just trying to I could learn a whole bunch of words. I could learn all these words once I knew how to make the sounds. But there's other things you could do now too. There's all kinds of Quizlet. Quizlet is out there. There's other apps. A lot of people have made flashcards already with the audio on there. And you can practice these. So then we start going through some little particles. Like this one. Sa.
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 So for a long time, I've thought about this word. Because you have a body part right here, which is called achsa. My sa. It's the base of the neck. What's interesting to me is technically you have achsa, achsha, achya. The base of my neck, my face. Then you have achsha. Right there, they seem like, so sa, sha, ya, sha. We're going over this once, and a student said, hey, that's the 4 classifiers. Whoa! That's too strange. And so maybe there's some way to link those things. Sa, sha, ya, sha. Who knows, right? But there's a couple of them, sa and sha. You don't really say those ones very much on their own. They usually combine with something else. You'll see it with sa, da, I, a scarf. Warms up around the sa. Sate, thing on the sa. Shaytuch, inside of the sha. So, how do you say mouth? Anybody know how to say mouth?
Okay.
Yeah, ka. Or kha. I think it's kha. What about in the mouth? We know how to say in the mouth? Is that one of those in things? If you get it, I'll be really impressed. Because it doesn't have kha in it at all. Or kha. Shaka.
Oh.
What? So in the mouth is literally on the neck. So it's just wild stuff, right? So anyways, when we start looking at individual little particles, sometimes we just look at them to say, okay, this is what this thing does, but we call it a particle because it doesn't usually exist on its own. It links up with other things and it does a job. So sometimes as we learn in Tlingit, you'll take a real close look at some little things, but then sometimes like, well, this is one of those things where just remember what job it does rather than the individual meaning, but sometimes it's helpful to learn that. So sa is related, it comes from a verb, like everybody knows, a lot of us know the verb duwasak, right? You know that verb? Talking about like being called something or what your name is. So the verb root is technically saw. So you could say, Yechat uwasa. That's how I was named. If you're telling some story about you got some Tlingit name. But that's more like, not like, this is what people call me. It's like, this is what I was named. Achsayi, that's the noun form pulled out of that verb. So sometimes there's a really big relationship with these things. What's wild, anybody ever hear these words? Daseok or aseok? Anybody heard either of those before? Breath or life. Dachdaseguat, living things. That is a Shh. Stop listening to me, watch. That's a repetitive form of the verb root saw. So there's a whole bunch of ways that these things tie together. The base of the neck, breathing, naming, being called something. I was listening to this recording from a speaker named Kenny Austin. I took a class with him in I think it must have been the summer of 2000 on this campus. Somewhere right over, I don't know, I have no idea where it would have been. All the buildings were different at that time. So there's another little particle. This will be the last thing we do this week. And we'll just pick it up here. Start moving through this thing, sometimes at a more detailed level. It's like, okay, you've done this before just to learn these things, just to memorize them, basically. But now we're going to start like really looking at how they function. So if you ever seen someone get a name, like we're going to call this thing Taya. We're going to give it a name. So I would take out some money, put money on it, and I'd say Taya. And everybody would say Taya. There's this little at the end. If I was getting the name Khone, everybody would repeat this, and the at the end. We call it a focus particle. It just says, pay attention to this thing. This is the thing you have in aya, awe, ayu, ahe. It's going to pair up with things, and it doesn't always matter what it means. It just means it has a function. You'll hear people say, "Gunnish cheesh." Just put a little emphasis on the gunnish cheesh. Yewe hayechni gunnish cheesh. Yewe yanshak watan yata. I keep saying we're going to do this story. We didn't even do it. But let me give you something to do. So you did your bird sentences this week. We memorized a bunch of bird names last week. This is what I'd like you to do. Write some Tlingit sentences just introducing yourself to us. Don't do anything you don't want to do. And I mean that. Like there's no structure to it. Share what you would like to share about yourself. Your name if you want to, where you're from, who your people are, but whatever. Some people, my dad left. I don't want to talk about him. That's fine. Don't. Forget that person. And so it's a non-invasive thing. Share only what you're comfortable with. But just come up with a few sentences. If you need any help for like the introduction type of stuff, look ahead to chapter 3. It's got all of those phrases in there, a whole bunch that you want to use. There is an introduction template in the beginning Lingít Workbook, but it's just an option. Lots of ways to do this kind of stuff. And not looking for some structured thing. Say this thing, say that thing, say this thing, say that thing. Whatever you want to share about yourself. You like to play the tambourine? I could tell you how to say it. I had to look it up because let's see. George Davis came up with a name for a tambourine. Something like Jikwasha or something. Anyways, just tell us a little bit about yourself. It's also a way for us to get to know each other. A lot of what we do is just sort of sharing some sentences, listen to me talk about a whole bunch of stuff, practicing saying some things. It's good to get to know each other too. There is a hike this weekend, is that right? Do you want to share
Saturday.
any details on it?
Yeah, so we'll have a hike. We'll probably start around, are we unmuted? Yeah, so we'll probably start around, I don't know, just to be safe, just in case, we'll start around 10. And then we could all meet and kind of set the stage for it. And then the hike would probably be like 3 hours, but there and back. super easy. I'm just gonna start off easy, and then I'll print out a couple like hiking pages that I've worked on just for like vocab, so we can try to stay in the language. Everyone's welcome.
Where do folks meet at?
So I just need to get everyone's contact information, but we could probably just meet here on campus.
Okay.
And then go from here and carpool.
Okay.
Parking lot?
Yeah, the
Or in
parking
front
lot.
of this building or
Yeah, well, where the shuttle bus picks up people, that's where
bus
we can
stop?
meet. Yeah, bus stop. Do you have Heather Berg's contact information?
Yes.
For the beginner Lingít class?
Uh-huh.
And then I let Noea know about the advanced classes.
Okay. Okay.
But I didn't know if anybody, you said one person.
Yeah, I know Christine said in the chat that she was definitely interested, and some other people might be interested. I don't know.
Yeah, because this is just the first of many too.
Okay.
Get it going to be like going for coffees or like just doing things in the language.
Okay. So 10 a.m.
Parking lot or bus stop.
right there, like right there where the bus picks people.
Yeah, yeah, the regular bus stop. 10
I'll
a.m.
send an email out to folks and
Okay, cool.
see who might want to go.
Yeah.
I'll send it to Ida as well.
Yeah, in the future, I'll have like the UAS van training, so I could take a van full of people if people don't have vehicles. And right now, I have 3 seats in my car. So.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sheesh. Yakecha. See you folks next week.
Cheese.
Sheesh.
Hey, sheesh.
Is saying like Nick, is that like Kate? Because in emails, so David Todd and Nick Crippen sent me, they always say Nick, Sky, and I'm wondering if that's like fire.
Yeah, we